Montana Territory, January 8, 1879. The blizzard came down like the sky had cracked open. Patrick Keller leaned into the wind, his coat pulled tight, snow crusting the brim of his hat. He had just made it back to his cabin after checking on his stock 24 cattle huddled in the lower pasture and was halfway through unbuckling his saddle when the shape appeared through the whiteout. A figure, stumbling, wrapped in a heavy cloak that whipped in the wind. He dropped the reins and ran. "Hey," he shouted, boots crunching through snow, heart hammering. "Hold on," the figure turned, staggered, and nearly dropped. He caught her by the arms just before she hit the ground. Her hands were ice, her face pale beneath the snow-drenched hood. Eyes the color of storm clouds locked with his wild, wide, and full of something he could not name. "I need shelter," she said, voice rough as gravel. "You found it," Patrick said. He lifted her up, no heavier than a sack of flour, and carried her through the drift to the cabin door. Inside, the fire was low but alive. He kicked it up with fresh wood, laid her near it on the old buffalo robe, and stripped off his gloves, then hers. Her fingers were blue at the tips. "You came through the pass?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "There is nothing up there but timber and wolves," she blinked slowly. "I had no choice," he did not press. Not yet. Instead, he grabbed a tin cup and poured water from the kettle, brought it to her lips. She drank with shaking hands. "I am Patrick Keller. This is my land," she nodded. "Etta Kincaid. You alone?" she hesitated. "Yes." Patrick studied her a long moment. She had the bearing of someone who had run too far for too long. Her skin was sun-kissed beneath the cold, and the way she held herself straight-backed despite the exhaustion spoke of grit that had been earned, not taught. He stood, fetched one of the thick quilts from the bed and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You can rest here. I will not ask any more questions tonight." Her gaze softened then, like she had not expected kindness. "Thank you." He gave a single nod, then turned to stoke the fire again. They passed the next few hours in silence. Patrick worked on a stew and poured her a bowl when it was ready. She ate slowly, careful, like she had gone hungry more than once. When she finished, she sat back against the wall, eyes tracking the flicker of firelight. "Where are you headed, Etta?" he finally asked. She pulled the blanket tighter around her. "South, maybe Utah. I do not know anymore. I just needed to get free." Patrick's jaw tensed. He did not ask from what. "I am not running from the law," she added, almost like an apology. "I did not think you were." She looked at him then, really looked. "Why are you being kind?" he shrugged. "Because it is right." Her eyes stayed on him, steady. "You live alone, always have. No wife." "No," she was quiet a moment. "That is hard to believe," he chuckled. "I reckon most people believe what suits them." Etta's smile was faint, but it was there, and it hit him square in the chest. Outside, the storm raged on. Later, when the wind died to a whisper and the fire had warmed the room, Etta stood and moved closer to the hearth. She had not asked for more than shelter, but there was a heaviness in her that clung like frost. Patrick was seated in the rocker, boots off, coat hung. He watched her. "You are not used to trusting people," he said plainly. "No, I am not," he nodded once. "You do not have to." She turned to him, her eyes catching the firelight. "You are different." He did not answer that. She took one step closer. "I have been running since November. I have not slept indoors in 3 weeks. I lost my horse 2 nights ago, and I have not felt safe in months." Patrick stood slowly. "You are safe here." Etta looked up at him, chin lifted, voice low. "That means more than I can say." He reached out, touched her hand. Her fingers curled around his without hesitation. At midnight, the wind stopped. Patrick had offered her the bed and taken the floor, but she had shaken her head. "That is not what I want." He had not moved, not spoken, just watched her. Etta stepped toward him, heart in her throat. "I want to feel something, good, even if it is just for tonight." He stepped forward. "I will not take what is not freely given." "It is," she whispered. "It is." By the time dawn broke soft and gold across the horizon, they were sitting on the edge of the bed, wrapped in the same quilt, shoulders touching. Etta looked over at him. "Do you believe in fate?" Patrick ran a hand through his hair. "I believe in choices." She nodded slowly. Then let me make one, he turned to her, eyes searching. Etta, I have nothing left out there and no one. But here with you it feels like the running stopped, he swallowed hard. You sure? She took his hand. Will you marry me? Patrick let out a breath. I will. An hour later they stood in front of the old mirror nailed above the hearth, hands clasped. He spoke the words slow and sure. She repeated them without stumbling. There was no preacher, no paper, nothing but the fire and the promise, but it was enough. Patrick kissed her gently when it was done, forehead against hers. Wife, she laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. Husband? Outside, the sun climbed higher, and for the first time in a long while neither of them felt alone. The snow held until mid-morning, then softened into a dull, drifting hush. Patrick stepped outside to shovel a path to the shed while Etta sat at the table with a needle and thread, mending a tear in the shoulder of her cloak. The cabin smelled of the coffee he had boiled over the hearth, and the warmth still clung to the walls from the night before. When he returned, his gloves stiff with frost, she didn't look up. Her brow was drawn, lips pressed, the rhythm of her stitching steady and practiced. You sew like you've done it for pay, he said, setting his gloves by the fire. She nodded once. I have, he waited, in Kansas City, for a dressmaker's wife. She didn't like me much, but I was cheap and quiet. Patrick pulled out the second chair and sat across from her. You stay there long? Not after her husband started asking me to stay late. Her fingers paused, then resumed. I don't like being watched. He didn't speak, just let the silence hold. After that, I took work where I could, cattle camps, cook tents, laundry lines. Never stayed anywhere more than 2 months. Patrick leaned back, chair creaking beneath him. What made you think you could come through the crazy woman pass in January? She looked up for the first time. I didn't think. I just didn't want to be caught. He studied her face, the quiet force behind her words. You're not hunted. I was followed out of Sheridan, didn't recognize the man, but I knew the kind, stared too long, stayed too close. Patrick stood and crossed to the cupboard. He pulled down a tin of biscuits he'd baked 2 days earlier and set them on the table. You figure he's still trailing behind you? No, she took one slowly. I crossed the creek twice just in case. You know how to throw a trail, she nodded. I learned. He sat again, hands resting on the table. You plan to keep moving? Etta folded the cloak neatly, set it aside. Not anymore. Because of the storm, she met his gaze steady. Because of you, the moment held quiet and sure. Patrick looked down at his hands. I've got enough here for both of us, but it's work. Fence needs mending come spring. There's a calf due next month and timber to haul before runoff. I wasn't asking to be kept. I know, he said gently, but I want you to stay. Her jaw set, not in defiance, but consideration. I've never had a place last more than a season, not since my father passed. He waited. He was a blacksmith in Abilene, drank too much, but he loved me right. Patrick reached over, palm up. She laid her hand in his. You'll have a place here as long as you want it, he said. Name on the deed doesn't matter to me, she gave the faintest nod. Then I'll stay. That night they shared the fire again, side by side, not touching but near enough to feel each other's warmth. Patrick whittled a strip of pine, the curls dropping to the floor in soft spirals. Etta strung a line between 2 nails by the stove and hung her cloak to finish drying. You ever been married before? She asked, not looking over. No. Why not? He set the knife down. Didn't see the point in courting when I couldn't offer much more than land and long hours. You think that's all you have? He looked toward her. It's what I've built. She turned then, facing him full. I'd take that over a house full of fine things and no peace. They shared a long look. There was no rush to fill the quiet, no need. Etta shifted closer, her voice low. I don't know what kind of wife I'll be. I don't sew for pleasure, I don't sing, and I've got more bad dreams than good. Patrick's voice was steady. I don't need much, just truth. She nodded once. That I can give. When the fire burned down to coals and the wind outside had gone still, he reached for her hand again and she leaned in without hesitation. It was not the start of something fragile. It was the beginning of something earned. By the end of the week, the snow had settled into dense drifts along the eaves. The wind had calmed, but the cold stayed sharp. Etta spent her mornings beside the stove, boiling beans, sorting dried apples, and learning the rhythm of a house that had once belonged to one man alone. Patrick returned from the woodshed one afternoon carrying a bundle of cedar branches. Etta was kneading dough at the table, sleeves rolled, a thin layer of flour dusting her forearms. "They've been bedding down by the creek," he said, setting the wood near the stove. "I saw tracks this morning, fresh, probably elk." Her hands didn't pause. "You hunt them, when the need calls." She nodded once, folding the dough in on itself. "My father wouldn't touch game unless our stores ran short. Said killing what you didn't need was a kind of bragging." Patrick leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. "He'd teach you to shoot," he tried, she said, "but I was better with a blade, quieter." "You carry one now," she looked up at that. "Always." He didn't ask to see it. He just said, "Good." Later, as the bread rose near the fire, Etta brought out a bundle from the bottom of her trunk, a small stack of pages bound with twine and worn soft at the corners. She laid it on the table, unsure. "What's that?" Patrick asked. "Letters," she said. "From a friend. She wrote me all through last year, helped me believe I still had a name worth answering to." He didn't touch them. "She back east, Colorado, or she was. She married a blacksmith and stopped writing come fall. You miss her," Etta shrugged. "She's the only one who ever called me brave." Patrick tilted his head. "You are." Her eyes lingered on his, steady. "Maybe now." That evening they sat beneath the same quilt as before, not from need but wanting. Patrick had brought in a small tin of tobacco and was rolling a smoke when Etta eased against his side. "You ever miss company?" she asked, voice low. "The kind that talks too loud and stays too long." He chuckled, the sound deep. "Not once." "I do," she said. "Sometimes. Not the noise, but the knowing someone's just beyond the door." "You think you'll want that again?" "Maybe," she answered, "but not right away." He took her hand, knowing better than to offer comfort she hadn't asked for. "We'll make it as quiet or full as you want." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd be able to choose. You can now." They sat that way until the fire dipped low, the only sound the soft crackle of wood and the hush of wind brushing the walls. When Patrick rose to bank the coals for the night, Etta stood too, brushing her skirt smooth. "I want to help with the calves when they come," she said. "I've done it before, I know what to watch for." He looked at her, brow raised. "You sure?" "I wouldn't say it if I wasn't." He nodded once. "Then you'll be by my side," she smiled, slow and quiet. "I already am." That night they lay beneath wool blankets, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist. Sleep came easy. Outside, the moon climbed above the trees, silver on snow. Inside, warmth held. Not just from the fire, but from something steadier, something no storm could undo. By late February, the thaw had begun. Slow, reluctant, but certain. The icicles hanging from the porch eaves dripped steady through each afternoon, and the creek behind the ridge had started to murmur again beneath its crust of frost. Etta stood just beyond the corral, sleeves rolled, apron tied over her skirt, watching the heifer circling near the fence. Her hands were chapped raw from hauling water and splitting kindling, but she never shied from the work. Patrick leaned against the post beside her, rubbing his jaw. "She's close," she murmured, eyes fixed on the animal's sides. "Tomorrow, maybe sooner," Patrick said. Etta shifted her weight. "She's favoring her right leg." He glanced over. "You've got a good eye." "I listened more than I spoke," she said. "Pick things up that way." He nodded, then looked back toward the ridge. "I'll ride out after supper, check the trap line." "I'll go," she said. Patrick raised a brow. "It's 2 miles through slush and brush. You still want it?" "I said I'd work beside you." "You did." She didn't blink. "I meant it." That evening they saddled the gelding and the mule and rode into the narrowing light. The snow was patchy, revealing dark earth in places, the trail slick with melt. Patrick led, Etta close behind, a rifle slung across her shoulders. "Any reason you set traps this far out?" she asked. "Wolves took a calf last spring. I don't like surprises." She eased her mount alongside his. Where I came from, surprises usually came wearing a badge and a smile. He didn't speak for a moment. I'm not interested in anyone's past but mine and yours. Then you should know something. Patrick slowed. Go ahead. I worked for a freighter out of Cheyenne last summer. Hauled salt and flour east. The man ran whiskey in the barrels. When he got caught, he named every hand he'd ever hired, including me. Patrick kept his eyes ahead. Did they come after you? They tried, but I slipped out before the judge could put my name to anything. He glanced over. You afraid it'll follow you here? I'm not afraid, she said, but it might. Patrick reached over, reined her mount to a halt. They sat quiet for a long breath. Then he said, I don't care what they say. If you stayed, I'd still choose you. Etta's mouth parted slightly, then closed again. You already did. They rode the rest of the trail in silence, the kind that didn't press, didn't need filling. At the traps, they found a fox already stiff and 2 empty snares. Patrick reset the lines while Etta kept watch, gaze scanning the ridge. As they turned back toward home, dusk fell fast. The last light caught in her hair, that deep chestnut turned copper at the edges, and Patrick found his eyes on her more than the trail. She noticed. What? She asked, half turning. He shook his head. Just thinking. About nothing that needs saying. She gave a soft laugh. That's not the same as staying quiet, no, he agreed, but it's close. They reached the cabin well past dark. The fire had gone to embers, but the warmth still lingered. Etta peeled off her boots, set her rifle in the corner, and stretched her back with a groan. You're sore, Patrick said. Nothing I can't sleep off. He brought her the tin cup, still warm with broth. Wasn't sure you'd tell me what you did. I wasn't sure you'd listen. I did. She took the cup, sipped slow. You know what I wanted more than anything when I first saw this place? He shook his head. Stillness. Not silence, not safety. Just a place that didn't expect anything from me I wasn't willing to give. And did you find it? Etta looked at him, long and true. I did. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing hers. Then let's keep it that way. She set the cup down and stepped closer. I want to build something here, not just help you keep it standing. Patrick drew her in, arms around her waist. Then we'll build it together. No more words passed between them that night. Just the quiet strength of understanding, the warmth of shared breath, and the certainty that neither of them had anywhere else left to run. March brought rain before it brought green. At night, it drummed soft on the cabin roof, steady as breath. The snow had melted off the ridge, leaving behind dark patches of earth and the sharp scent of wet pine. Etta stood beneath the overhang near the chicken run, apron damp at the hem, holding a pail of feed while 2 hens squabbled in the mud below. You ever think about adding more stock? She asked as Patrick came up beside her, shoulder brushing hers. He glanced at the birds. I tried once. Lost half the lot to a fox and the rest to a neighbor who didn't believe in fences. You ever think about trying again, if I had someone who knew how to keep a coop right? She looked over, mouth tilting. Lucky for you, I do. They spent the afternoon turning over the garden plot near the south fence. The soil was still heavy, but it broke easier under the spade than Patrick had expected. Etta worked beside him with sleeves rolled and hair tied back, the muscles in her arms taut with each lift and push. She didn't complain, just kept pace, quiet and focused. You plan to seed potatoes first? She asked. Carrots, then beans. We'll need to build a second box if you want squash. I want tomatoes, she said. Big ones. He paused, leaned on his spade. You don't strike me as the tomato type. She looked up, eyes narrowed in mock challenge. You think I'm too hard for tomatoes? I think you're about to tell me a story that ends with a tomato plant and a broken window. She knelt to pull a stone from the soil, laughing low. My mother used to grow them in whiskey barrels. Said you had to talk to them or they wouldn't ripen. You plan on talking to yours, only if you won't, she said, but I suspect you're better at quiet things than I am. That night, they sat on the porch steps with their boots off and their ankles touching. The rain had cleared and left the air smelling of cedar and loam, A single whippoorwill called from the trees. "Did you always want this?" Etta asked. "Land quiet, your own roof." "I used to dream about the rail lines," Patrick said. "Going west, working a crew, seeing the coast. But my uncle died and left me this place. I came to settle it, then couldn't bring myself to leave." "You ever regret staying?" He shook his head. "I didn't have a reason to leave. Now I've got a reason to stay." She turned toward him, knees drawn up beneath her skirt. "I used to think I'd end up alone, not because I couldn't be loved, but because I couldn't trust anyone to stay. You can trust me, I do." When he reached for her, it was with the ease of someone who knew how to hold without breaking. Her forehead rested against his, breath shared between them. "I want a life with you," she whispered. "Not just shelter, not just a place to stop running. You have it," he said. "You've had it since the morning you asked me to marry you." They went inside when the air turned cool. He lit the lamp while she drew the curtains. No words passed between them as they moved through the small space, hands brushing, glances caught and held. When they lay down, it was with the surety of something built, not taken. Weeks passed. The garden rose sprouted pale green shoots. The heifer calved without trouble, and Etta named the calf Reed. Patrick said it was a foolish name, but he built a pen for it anyway. They traded a pair of hides for ducklings from a family downriver, and Etta built a brooder box by the stove from scrap barn wood. One evening, as the last light faded into the folds of the mountains, Etta came in from the yard with a folded letter in her hand. Patrick looked up from the fire. "From Colorado," she said. "She found me." He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "You going to write back?" "I already did," Etta said. "Told her I married a man with good hands and steady eyes. Told her we've got beans coming in and a hen that won't stop brooding." Patrick stepped closer. "You tell her you're happy." "I told her I'm home." Spring bled into summer. The ridge turned green and the creek ran full and clear. They cleaned the cabin from top to bottom, patched the roof, whitewashed the walls inside. Etta planted marigolds beneath the windows, and Patrick built a bench from fallen pine for the porch. One night in late June, they sat there after supper, watching the fireflies blink along the tree line. Etta rested her head on his shoulder. "If we ever had children," she said, "what would you teach them first?" He thought for a while. "How to read the sky." "How to tell the weather by the wind," she nodded. "I'd teach them not to flinch when someone raises their voice. I'd teach them to speak soft so they wouldn't have to." She took his hand, fingers lacing through his. "I never thought I'd live long enough to think about things like that. You lived long enough to build something better." They sat until the stars came out, bright and wide above the ridge. The night was warm, the porch boards beneath them worn smooth by time and use. Neither of them spoke again, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything worth saying had already been lived, years past. The garden grew deeper roots, and so did they. New fences went up. A second barn was raised. Letters came and went. Neighbors passed through, some stayed. Some carried news from towns Etta no longer missed. They never left the homestead. And they never wanted to. By the time the first frost touched the hills again, Etta stood in the doorway with her hand on her belly, watching Patrick mend a gate. He looked up, smiled the way he only smiled at her, and set his hammer down. She called out, "You finished." "Just about." She stepped down onto the path, the hem of her dress brushing the dry grass. Her hand stayed on her stomach. "Then come walk with me." He did, and as they moved together through the fading light, their hands met and held, the years behind them steady, the years ahead already unfolding. Nothing rushed, nothing uncertain, only belonging, only love.